Hello everyone. Today we're going to be looking at the Pilot custom standard models that I have in my collection. So in the Pilot custom series of fountain pens, there's what they call the higher end, the pinnacle end, which represents the pens like the custom Urushi. Then you have the standard models. Then you have the heritage models represented by the custom heritage 912 and so on. Then you have the other custom models, like for example the custom 823, which is a vacuum filler, and there's a couple of wooden finished models as well. But these are what Pilot classifies as the standard models. And what's so special about the standard models is they are meant to give people the biggest range of nibs to try, and I would say that they would probably represent the majority of the pens which Pilot actually sells and positions to people in the market. So in front of me you have the Pilot Custom 74, Pilot Custom 742, and last but not least the Custom 743. As you can tell, the pens actually start from the smallest all the way up to the biggest. However, they aren't that super different in size. What's different though are the little details which Pilot has actually put into each one of these models to make them kind of stand apart, particularly since there is a price gap between all these models. To get the pricing out of the way, the Pilot Custom 74, which is the blue pen, is priced at around 12 to 14,000 yen. Custom 742 is priced about 20,000 yen, and lastly the Custom 743 is it's around the 30,000 yen mark. As at the time that I'm recording this, yen is very close to the Singapore dollar in terms of 1 to 100, so probably this is around the $300 range. This is around the $200 range, and this is like the 120 to 130 Singapore dollar range. In terms of specific differences, one of the main differences is that if you wanted to have the biggest range of nibs out there, which is 15 different nib variations, 742 would be the one to get, because it would have the full 15 nibs available. In this range from the extra fine, soft fine, fine, medium, soft fine, medium, medium, soft medium, broad, double broad, coarse, and then we have the lettered version nibs, which are the PO or postal, the FA or the Falcon, WA or the Waverly, SU or stub, and lastly the MS or music. The 743 would lack the music nib. If you really wanted that, you have to go with the 742 or the 74. What the 74 is lacking in terms of that 15 nib options are actually all the lettered nibs like the WA, the stub, the FA, and the PO. However, you can get all these details from Pilot's very detailed website. So I wanted to show you the pens collectively, right? So when I say that Pilot has actually designed these pens very well, it's with details in mind, particularly in terms of things like if you focus on this little band down here, which connects the clip, you can tell that as you go up from the 74, 742 and 743, the band gets progressively thicker. And if you look at the center band, you can tell that the center band gets more ornate, or in the Custom 74's case, it's just a simple plain silvery band. My finish here is actually in the transparent blue. The more common finish would be something like these two down here. However, I think the band details are roughly the same. The custom 742 would have a slightly thicker, I think it's the same center band except for the addition of the ring on top. Custom 743 has a very much bigger band with probably the same size ring on top as custom 742. And then looking down into the bottom part of the pen, you could tell that the size of the thickness of the rings down here get progressively bigger as well. So looking at the nibs, which are probably the most, by the way, the clips are roughly the same size regardless of whichever pen series you get. So opening up the pens, I guess this is probably, okay, so before we get into the nibs, all three pens obviously would fit a Con 70, although for the Custom 74 it is very tight fit, as you can tell. And while we're here, you'll notice that the Custom 74's finial at the end is a little bit more blunt compared to these two, which are more like cigar shaped. And then looking at the grip section area, these two pens have exactly the same dimensions when it comes to grip section. They are extremely comfortable, with the center of the band here measuring about 11 millimeters. This one is slightly smaller at about 10 millimeters, measured in the middle of the grip section. And even though I have different nibs down here, the sizes would be kind of the same regardless of the nib choices you use. The Custom 743 has a size 15 pilot nib, which is kind of like a Jowo number 6 in terms of a size reference. The Pilot Custom 742 has a number 10 pilot nib, and that's actually, I'm not sure whether it can be directly compared to a Jowo number 5. And the last one would be the number 5 Pilot Custom nib. Okay, so size comparisons, that's what they look like roughly. The feeds are pretty much the same in terms of their design, with the exception of a little bit more fins being provided for the bigger nibs. So I'm going to write a little bit with these pens, and I'm going to tell you what I think in terms of how these pens are kind of positioned. So the first pen I'm writing with is the Pilot Custom 74. I'm using Konpeki in this pen, and Konpeki by itself is actually a very wet ink, and it's an ink with quite a lot of shading, which you might be able to tell from this Fine Nib which I'm using. In terms of writing experience, the nib is smooth with just a tiny hair of feedback. The main part about this nib is it's not exactly a very soft nib in terms of feel, which I'm totally fine with. And the size of the nib, which with it being a Pilot number 5, it actually lends itself to be used on notepads like this A5 notepad that I'm using today. Right? I feel that if I'm actually writing with larger sheets of paper, perhaps an A4 size notepad, probably would want to go with a larger pen, or rather a larger nib. Although you still can use Custom 74's nib for very writing on bigger notepads, I just have this feel that it wasn't meant to be used that way. So Custom 742, this time it's with the extra fine nib, and I'm using Tsukushi, sorry. which is a very beautiful brown, dark brown ink, which unfortunately Pilot has discontinued recently. First thing to note is, I obviously I like fine nibs in my Pilot pens, and the extra fine is probably one of my favorites when it comes to kind of representing or writing in cursive, right? It's a very delicate line that it produces. In terms of the actual feel of the nib, there is obviously a little bit more feedback compared to the fine. However, I really like the line that this nib produces. Like I mentioned in my earlier video, it is probably more suited for cursive writing rather than print. If I was doing a lot of print writing, I would probably stick with fine and above in terms of the Pilot nib choice. And I think this 742's nib, the number 10 Pilot nib, is probably like the Goldilocks nib of choice, right? I mean, if you're not sure, just get the number 10. So moving on to the 743. This time I've inked it up with Murasaki Shikibu, this beautiful purplish, light purplish ink. And again, this is a very, very different nib from the other two in that it's the FA or the Falcon nib. This nib is extremely soft feeling, right? I made the mistake earlier on of assuming that this would be like the ultimate nib for me, and I wouldn't want to use any other nib after buying this particular nib, but it's not the case. I think that the Falcon nib it's nice to use occasionally. However, as an everyday nib, I prefer actually one of the other standard nib choices. I think a fine would be perfect for everyday use for me. As you can tell, it's extremely wet, and you can get decent line variation with this particular nib. So some closing thoughts about the Pilot standard series of fountain pens. First off, even though the 743 is the largest of the standard size, you might make the assumption that it's a huge pen, right? However, it is most definitely not extremely large pen. Most of you would probably have one of these around, G2, and the G2 when deployed kind of dwarfs a 743. Right? So I mean, by no means are any of these pens massive, right? However, the 743 is probably the one that suits my hand the best. It's about 13.1 centimeters long when it's not posted, and that to me is kind of, it's not always the case that the bigger is better, but this pen probably feels the best in my hand. But to sum up, all these pens perform excellently. Right, I feel that their nibs are very well tuned. I mean, they must have like a fantastic quality control in their factory. All their nibs feel very, very, they perform very well. And all these pens feel that it's more the nib than anything else. I mean, the finish is nice and all that, but I just feel that in terms of the price you're paying for these pens, you're probably paying more for the nib than anything else, right? Which is my preference anyway. I mean, great nib options. You have lots of flexibility in choosing the nib that you like. I tend to gravitate towards the finer of the Pilot range of nib choices. For a long time, I was contemplating whether or not I would get the extra fine or the PO or the postal nib. I'm pretty glad that I got the extra fine. Still thinking about the PO nib though, so maybe we'll give that one a shot in a future video. And last but not least, price. I feel that even though these pens are not cheap, I mean, it's about 300 Singapore dollars, right? If you look at these pens in comparison with other fountain pens with a 14 karat nib. These are actually very fairly priced, especially now at this current situation where the yen is fairly cheap in comparison with other currencies. So definitely value for money in a way, right? So that concludes my video for today. I hope you found this video useful. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the comment box below. I would love it if more of you, after watching this, subscribe to my channel so I can continue producing more content. Please give me a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.